I was the person who was going to make this happen. And if I didn't make it happen, it never was going to happen.
Christy, welcome to Shaping Pottery and share with me, what is something that's helped you the most along your pottery journey so far?
That, there are so many things that have helped, but when you ask the question, the thing that has helped me the most is being surrounded by other potters, because we all have a different approach to clay. And even though in my mind, I think that I'm doing the best that I can, I may be missing something that is just tiny that would help me grow in another way. So having people around that are able to help me problem solve or just set a really good example of how to pack up for a show or how to trim a pot it's priceless.
Absolutely agree. Shaping Nation, the more you get around other potters or other artists in that matter, the better you're going to learn, even if it's just simply asking somebody on Instagram. I love that. So tell me the story how you got started making pottery.
I started in clay in college. So I went to Indiana University, Pennsylvania to become an art teacher. And of course, to be a good teacher, you have to learn all the studios. I didn't have any clay experience in high school. So when I got into that clay studio, like many of us, my mind exploded and I never wanted to leave. So that was where that all started, really, with going to that class and taking it over and over again. I actually dropped other studios so I could take more clay classes. So I probably have a minor in clay as well as my bachelor's degree for teaching.
Absolutely love it. What were you feeling during that first clay class?
Curiosity and just a general happiness of like, what is this stuff? Like, oh, and also being completely amazed by what was going on in that studio. Because even though it was a beginner's class, there were always grad students and upperclassmen in the studio working. So we constantly were being fed all of these things that they were making that were, of course, much more advanced than us. So we could learn by watching them as well as what we were being taught within the curriculum itself.
Absolutely love that. So you contribute your growth as an artist to the classes at Touchstone for crafts. Tell me more
Mhm.
about that.
So I got my degree in teaching, graduated from college, and then went on to get married and focus on working and having a child. And my life became centered around being an art teacher and setting up adult life. And what I did was I didn't make any art. Like I would make a little bit on the side, but I wasn't taking any classes. And I really needed to take a class because I thought for me to be a teacher, I need to continue growing as well. So I took this class at Touchstone. And it's a week-long immersive class where you stay on campus, they feed you fabulous food, they ring the bell, you go to class, you go to lunch, and you are completely immersed from 9 in the morning until you decide you're going to bed, whether that's midnight or 4 in the morning. And that experience of being around clay people again and having that freedom of just making and not having responsibilities, it made my heart explode. And I came home from the class and I met with a friend of mine and I said, I can't live like this anymore, because I didn't even realize how much I missed being able to create, because I was so focused on being a successful teacher, which is a great thing. But I just forgot that I was an artist and I needed to go back to doing it. So it made me really reevaluate how I was living my life and what needed to change in small ways and then really big ways.
So when you were realizing this, how did you start balancing being an art teacher, mom, and also trying to pursue your own art?
My leisure time was no longer leisure. And what I started doing was looking for the times that I did have so that I set up a small studio in my garage. I had a wheel, I had a small kiln, and I was able to just decide, okay, I have an hour here. Like we finished dinner, so my son can play with my husband and I can go focus for an hour, or I wait till he would go to bed and just do those kinds of things. Because I didn't necessarily bring a lot of schoolwork home with me because I was able to keep work at work and come home and do that. But the biggest thing I did was I gave myself permission to have a babysitter so that I could focus on it. So I didn't watch TV. I stopped watching all the shows that I used to watch because I realized that for me to focus on becoming the potter that I wanted to be, I couldn't do it if I was sitting on my couch. Like I was the person who was going to make this happen. And if I didn't make it happen, it never was going to happen. So, and I was lucky that my family and my extended family were willing to support me and say, yes, we're here for you. We'll take care of him. Hey, if you don't show up for that, we get it. So I was really lucky that way.
Now, what advice would you give to someone that may be in sort of a similar situation that you were in?
So nobody's going to do this for you. It hurt. It hurt a lot for me. There was a lot of like hand wringing and crying over like, oh, I feel so badly not doing this and I want to do this. And the people around me said, you really need to do this to be happy. So take those baby steps. It doesn't have to be giant. It might be that you're going to dedicate yourself to taking a class and maybe you take it at an art center and it's one night a week, but it is one night a week where you allow yourself to be that artist that you know you are. And that's just the beginning of making time. Or maybe it's an hour in your studio, but no one's going to do it for you.
Absolutely love that advice. Shaping Nation, if you're in a situation where you are overwhelmed with work or you are a parent and you want to get in the studio but don't have that time, start with the smallest steps you can make. Get in there 5 minutes or an hour a day and make time to actually make, because that's the most important thing. I love that advice. So now, when you were at Touchstone, what is something you learned that you still use today?
Oh, that's a hard one. It was such a magical place. I guess to take advantage of the blocks of time that you have to play and make and do the thing, like take risks and do the things that you haven't done before. Because if you make the thing you already made in the beginning, what you might be perfecting that form, but you're not growing the form. So taking classes like that, the whole point is to learn something new and to absorb what's around you. Take that advice that teacher is showing you. Make the handles that they make, because it's how having those skills allows you to grow. So, I still do that. I just took a class with Jen Allen 2 weeks ago, and I'm still trying to figure out what I learned from that class, but I just sat and absorbed. I was so worried about what am I going to make? I'm like, no. You're not making anything yet. You are just learning, and that's okay.
I love that. Shape Nation, you have to change your mindset from being a maker, but you also have to change it to a learning mindset, keep you growing. So let's talk about your pottery. Can you tell me the story, how you started making the pottery that you make today?
Let's see. So the pottery that I make today comes from my first teacher was a decorator. So in studying his work and watching him work, I learned to take a form and decide where a design would fit and how does it fit on the whole form. And I know that everybody is influenced by the people that you first lay their eyes on their work. So I had to learn how to find my own patterns and my own design to do those kinds of things. But I think what I learned the most was find a form that I love and then take these ideas that I have for designs and find a best place to fit them on there. Because joining those two loves, like I had a client walk into my booth and at an art festival, and he said, "Oh, you're a painter." I said, "No, I'm a potter." And he said, "You're a painter." And I said, "Oh, I'm a potter who paints." Because I do love that illustrative quality. And that's what I've always worked for, is the loose kind of drawing, but incorporating it in all the sweet spots of a pot. So like on a teapot, I will tuck it over to the side, or I'll put it on the top of the lid. And I spend a lot of time just playing around with that. Like, where does it go? Does it fit here or does it fit there? That's probably the first thing that I learned, to play around and move those images until they fit where I wanted them to.
How can somebody practice that, like layering out the images onto the pots?
Well, there's 2 ways that I do them. So when in service meetings or faculty meetings at school, I take my agenda and I just start sketching on the back of it. So I have all these ideas of designs on maybe platters, or I'll draw a row of cups and play around with the same motif. So maybe I want to do, so I will play around with, what if I put the blackberries at the top? What if I put them at the bottom? And I have all of these sketches. Then when I get into the studio and I make my forms, it's a big jump from this flat drawing to wrapping those pieces around a form. And it doesn't always work. But I want it to work, but it doesn't always work. So what I will do is I will sketch out, like for my lemons example, I will sketch out a little group of lemons. If I know that I need 2 or 3 of these sets, I will cut them out of paper and I will put them on that form and I will turn it around on the table so I can see, oh, that's too big. That's too small. This needs to be moved right. It needs to be moved left. And it helps me play that. I'll even get my phone out and take pictures of it. Like sometimes I'll take pictures of my pots and I'll sketch on them because it's a really big risk to jump into putting images on pots. And I have done that too. I've just thrown all caution to the wind. I've drawn on the pot. Sometimes it works really well. And sometimes I just think you really should have waited. But I have folders, little cutouts of leaves. Like sometimes I just need one more leaf. So instead of drawing it on, I will put it on the design and move it to where I need it. And I show my students this at school because they're so afraid to take a risk. So I'll tell them, go draw it, cut it out, and put it on there. And they all of a sudden they're confident. Like, oh, I see what you mean. This looks so much better this way.
Some excellent advice right there. I love that. So you are inspired by vintage kitchen towels and aprons. How do these things impact the way you make your pottery?
Well, they're beautiful. They're sweet. They remind me of the women that I grew up with. Like I grew up in my mother's and my grandmother's kitchens. So kitchens are full of cooking implements and towels and things. So those aprons that had those kinds of fun illustrations of fruits and vegetables, like those just kind of get stuck in my mind because they're bright and they're colorful. They're very feminine and they kind of found their way to my pots and it became very easy to find, a quick Google search and I was down the rabbit hole and I need to print this one. I need to print this one. And I have sketchbooks of prints that I cut out and I just have pages and pages of images that if my brain is tired, I will just go browse and look through all of those pictures to see like, oh, I forgot about this lemon and blueberry composite.
What do you mean by when your brain is tired?
If I'm trying to come up with a design and nothing's just coming natural, or I just want something a little bit different and fresh, like I might be tired of making the same pattern over and over again. I will go back to these reference books and look for something that's a little bit different that I could incorporate. And maybe it's just a different leaf pattern to change it, or maybe a different grouping of tomatoes. Like I have a whole book dedicated to tomatoes.
How can someone start making their own reference book for themselves?
If you spend a little bit of time on Pinterest or anything, start screenshotting images that you like, that you think that you might like that motif on a pot. And if you screen save it and if you have access to a printer, print it out and just put it in a notebook. Like I'm a big fan of like, it's kind of a scrapbook sort of thing and I'll draw around them. And it just makes it really easy. Or if you really are a digital person, make a folder on your phone and pull those images up. Just have that slide of things that you are interested in putting it on a pot. And that way your brain is there when it doesn't have an idea. It's a great way to just kind of feed that.
I like that. And shaping, if you want to use more technology for it, you could even do like a slideshow and put it on your computer and just have it be swiping through whatever you're on your computer. So you're always having ideas.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And then, so something interesting I found is that you make pottery for the daily ritual of eating and drinking. Can you tell me more about that?
Humans are creatures of habit, and we love to give meaning to the things that we do. I think it's just part of our like hearts and soul. Not that everything has to have meaning, but we like to give object meaning for the things that we do. So our lives are full of occasions. Like I grew up with 2 families that loved the big table for the big dinner. And one family was very formal. And we had the china, and we had the crystal, and we had the good silverware. And then the other family was fit as many people as you can around that table, and every plate in the cabinet has to be on the table. So they were different, but they were the same because we were getting together because we loved each other and there was some kind of a special event going on. So I grew up valuing the dishes and I grew up valuing the meal itself. So that ritual is something special. when I became a potter, I started valuing these beautiful cups. The first cup I ever bought, like I just could not wait every morning to have coffee out of this thing because it was the first cup that I bought with my own money at a gallery. So it was very, very special to me. And it was Kristen Pavelka, and I bought it out at not at Red Lodge. I'm sorry, I can't think of the name that's out there. It'll come to me later. But it was so special to me that this young artist made this mug that I was immediately drawn to, and I wanted to have that. So having my morning coffee is special because I value this object. I value this artist's vision who made this thing so that it could be used every day. So I believe we all do that in some way, shape, or form. Anybody listening to this has already thought of the bowl, the cup, and the plate that they use for either every day, or like I have cups that are just for tea and I have mugs that are just for coffee. Don't ask me why. It's just how I am. It's just fun. I think they taste different that way. But I value that ritual if I get home from work and I have my tea, because it's how I can just stop from work, rest a little bit, and then I'm ready for the studio. And that's a ritual, and it brings something to my life that this person made this for me to do that.
Absolutely. So let's talk about discovering your voice. Can you tell me about the moment when you knew you were heading in the right direction with your pottery?
I don't know an absolute moment, but I know there was a time when I would unload a glaze kiln, and everybody knows that's Christmas morning. Open up that kiln and you're peeking in. And as I'm unloading the kilns, I'm smiling. And as I stand back and look at what I've made, I immediately want to go back in the studio and make more, because what I saw was what I felt was successful. So I was really pleased with the work that I had done. It worked well. It didn't craze, like the glaze worked, the design worked, and all of that. And I know that some people would say, well, that's very egotistical of you. But if that's the whole goal, is to be successful, we really should celebrate those times when we feel that we did something very, very well. And then right after that kind of thing was going on in my studio, I was getting feedback from my client who were saying, your work is so happy. I just love having coffee out of your mug. And I just thought, oh, some things are coming together. Not only do I feel good about my work, and I mean, I'm invested. So of course I think that it's really well done, but for my client to really say to me, I value your work and I love your work, so keep doing what you're doing. That's when I felt like, okay, I'm doing something right.
How long do you think it took you to get to that point?
Well, probably 10 years. That I always liked my work and felt that I was moving in the right direction. But getting the feedback from the clients is when I really felt like it was super successful. It probably took 10 years, and it took me narrowing down the work that I was doing. As I was trying out all kinds of patterns, because I was working in underglazed. So it's like the box of 6,000 colors. So I wanted to try all the colors and all the patterns, and I was doing that. And when you walked into my booth, it reflected a lot of beautiful things, but it didn't reflect a singular vision yet. And once I started moving those other things out and expanding one or two of my designs, that's when it started to go.
You mentioned narrowing down your work. What did that process look like?
Deciding, it was hard to decide which ones to go forward with. And at the time, I was fascinated with cherries. So I had this aunt who had this cherry tree that was like 40 feet high, and it was those beautiful bright red cherries. And I had to drive my truck underneath it and stand up in there. And I was just surrounded by these beautiful cherries. I had never experienced this before. So I was doing these cherry patterns so it was the terracotta clay with a white background and these bright pops of cherries, but also with contrasting black. And people were really responding to that. So I just decided this was the direction I was going to go, because the other pieces, they weren't responding to. So I was just thought, I've got to stop making these because they're filling up my shelves in the back and they're not selling. So I stopped doing those and just focused on the things that I knew people wanted more of. So they wanted plates to match a mug that they had got. So because I was working within the same color palette and the same pattern, they could get the things that they wanted. And that's how I decided that this was the direction I was going to go in. And I think I ran that one for probably 3 years. I have a few pieces left now, and that's it.
Absolutely love that. So what would you say was your biggest obstacle when it came to finding your own voice?
Having too many options. When you have all of the colors and all of the ideas, that's the obstacle, because you want to do all the things. And just deciding to limit yourself it's a decision, and you have to decide, okay, I'm going to stop this thing. And that was difficult for me to do because I was still interested in doing all the other patterns. But in order to really expand this pattern and take it to all the ways that I could, put it on a teapot, put it on all these things and have different versions of it, I really had to focus on doing that. Basically, it's like creating a shoe brand where you have your style of shoe, but you've got to have 10 to 12 different versions. People have choices. And also, so your brain doesn't die a slow death of doing the same thing over and over again.
So how did narrowing down help you expand your voice?
It allowed me to go from making just a few things to expanding onto, big oval platters, doing big, large decorative, like teapots. There's so many places to decorate on a teapot. I could flip-flop things around, and having a box sometimes is the best thing. By giving yourself a limit, it allows you to stay within those limits to expand, which sounds like a really big math problem. If you are able to work with 50 choices, you don't need 1,000, because 50 really is enough, or maybe it's 4. So limiting yourself just allows you to challenge the way that you lay things down and move things around. Like I said, with those little pieces of paper, I'm really big about just changing things subtly, or change the background color, and it could change everything.
I love that. Shaping Nation, sometimes the best solution is to literally limit the amount of things you are doing to your pottery, whether it's the amount of colors you're doing or techniques you're doing or the way you're placing things. Because now you're going to get more creative in the way you're thinking. I love that. Now, what advice would you give to someone looking to discover their own unique voice with their pottery?
Give yourself permission to work. As I said earlier, if you don't give yourself time, it's not going to happen. You have to be your biggest advocate within a high school. There are so many opportunities for me to do other things. So I could help coach this. I could do this, like, oh, we need a fundraiser for that. Can you chaperone the dance? And I had to make that decision of, no, I have a business, and I have a show this weekend, and this is what I choose to do. And what that told my people around me was that my business is important to me. And these other things, it's not that they're not important, but this is the direction that I'm going. So it's almost as if you have to set up boundaries as to what you're willing to do and not do. And it's not, I will do things, but I choose very carefully what it is that I'm willing to give my time to, because my creative life is really important. It 24/7, every day of the week is what I do. And I wouldn't have it any other way. So if you can give yourself, like we talked about earlier, those baby steps in, and those boundaries are valuing your time so that you can put the hours in, so that you have time to play with those designs and have time to make more and more and more.
How does one create these boundaries for themselves?
It's hard because people push back. They really do. And also too, a lot of the world doesn't value us because we don't put that message out there that our time is valuable. So, I don't even give reasons anymore. I just say, I'm sorry, I can't do that right now. It's okay. You don't owe the world an excuse. You can, I have a show and I have to load a kiln, or I can just say, I can't do that right now. And sometimes you just have to practice it and take a big, deep breath, because it is hard to say no to people. It is. And I had to practice it. And sometimes I would say no, and I would have to go into the other room and take a really big, deep breath and say, oh my God, I can't believe I said no to that. But I did, because every time you do say no, you're saying yes to yourself. And I can't emphasize that enough. Like, you really have to say yes to yourself.
I love that. Shaping Nation, it's going to be hard to say no, but you're going to have to learn to say no, because that's how you continue to grow and your pottery going to get better. You're going to be able to make the pottery that you want to make and have time to make.
Mhm.
Christy, it's been great chatting today. And as we're coming to a close here, what is one thing you want to hammer home with my listeners today?
Get in your studio. You've got to get in your studio and work and take the risk, make the pot, make more pots. Yeah, you just got to make and find friends, find really good friends.
Absolutely agree. Some excellent parting words of advice. Christy, it's been great. Hey, thanks for listening to this episode of Shaping Your Pottery with Nic Torres. If you enjoyed this episode, come join the Shaping Your Pottery newsletter, where I go into behind-the-scenes looks of how potters make their pottery and give you tips on how to grow your pottery and find your voice as well. If you want to join the Shaping Your Pottery newsletter, go to shapingpottery.com/newsletter or click the link in the description to sign up.